First of all, I think as a Southern California native, I don't care how much Showtime and the Showtime broadcast wants to push it. I don't think we'll ever call it the Punch Bowl. I still call it StubHub Center,
StubHub, right?
yeah, just like many people still call Crypto.com Arena a Staples Center or whatever it's called. We still call it Staples Center. I still call Dignity Health Sports Park StubHub Center.
Welcome back to the RBR Recap, episode 17. I am Alex Burgos, joined as always by my main man, Gabe Rivas, with some cool sunglasses on this episode. I got to ask you, Gabe, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. As you can all see, for those who can watch the podcast, I'm wearing sunglasses due to a little eye infection, a sty that I got on my left eye. Of course, it reached its pinnacle on a special weekend for boxing where 3 boxing cards were in Southern California. So just my luck. Of course, I was at the Zurdo fight during the broadcast as an interpreter. Luckily, I didn't have to do any post-fight interviews. It would have been really gross to have seen me with my little eye infection, the pus bursting out and trickling all over the place and on the broadcast. But luckily, I didn't have to do that. So everything's good. It'll go away soon. And looking forward to talking about boxing today.
Most definitely. Well, that shows that you're actually in the gym, putting in work, sparring. We are happy that we didn't see your face on the
yeah, that's my theory about what happened. I was sparring. I got my glove, touched my eye, and shouldn't have done that. So there you go.
Let's jump into a busy weekend. We're going to kick it off with the most important fight and the fight that took the cake in terms of action and meaningfulness overall in boxing. That was, of course, Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano 2, the rematch. Pretty controversial decision in the first fight, ended in a draw, a fight that many people thought Brian Castano won. Last night from the Punch Bowl, Charlo and Castano did it again, and it was a great fight. I mean, it was scheduled for 12 rounds. It ended up going 10. Charlo got the stoppage victory. It was a little bit of everything. I think it was a highly intense matchup, even when there wasn't like just fists flying left and right. There was a lot of thinking going on. There was a refined tactic from Charlo, I thought, and Castano really was a high level, come forward fighter. It just had a little bit of everything, both guys getting hit, both guys getting buzzed a little bit, Castano more so than Charlo, and Charlo having the discipline and intelligence in the ring to really refine the things that he needed to do. Listened, like he said in the post-fight, listened to Derek James more and really did what he needed to do to get the stoppage victory. He is now the undisputed 154-pound champion, owns all 4 belts, first time in the history of the 4-belt era that someone has claimed all the titles. And after the fight, he said a lot of interesting things. I thought I got to give a shout out to Charlo because I don't know if it's persona or putting on an act or whatever it is, but he's always super amped up and almost like, it's like you ask him, how's your day going? And he's like, good, motherfucker. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's always amped up and angry, it seems like. But like, and Jim Gray made mention of this. He said, he's like, this is your highest moment, your biggest moment. And he's like, it's as calm as I've ever seen you. Errol Spence said he had to be calm, describing what Charlo had to do. Jaron Ennis was just talking about being calm. And even when he was asked about the Canelo and Bivol fight over the week, he's like, Canelo needed to be more calm. It's all about being calm with these fighters. And these are the high level fighters. And Jermell Charlo did that beautifully. So I want to jump right into this fight. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Gabe, what were your thoughts on Jermell Charlo's 10th round knockout victory over Brian Castano?
First of all, I think as a Southern California native, I don't care how much Showtime and the Showtime broadcast wants to push it. I don't think we'll ever call it the Punch Bowl. I still call it StubHub Center. Just like many people still call Crypto.com Arena a Staples Center or whatever it's called. We still call it Staples Center. I still call Dignity Health Sports Park StubHub Center. I don't know.
That's a mouthful, man. The only reason I said Punch Bowl is because Dignity Health Center. I mean, it sounds like I'm going to like a Kaiser appointment. Like,
yeah. The only reason I know how to say it is because I've written it so many times for press releases in the past. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to recite the name. It's StubHub. StubHub sounds better, but eventually we need to find a name for this place in Carson, California, where we get spectacular fights. I remember being there for Robert Guerrero versus Yoshihiro Kamagai, among other fights. That's just Lucas Matisse versus John Molina Jr. For God's sakes, you know what
Bradley
I mean?
Provodnikov. I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, Bradley. I didn't go to that one, but that was amazing. So many great fights. So I guess we'll figure out what the name is. But another spectacular fight in Carson, California, at what we used to call the StubHub Center, in Carson, California. Like you said, Charlo did come in there more disciplined, more intelligent. Like you said, he's really amped up when he's doing interviews and stuff like that. But he's a different person when he's boxing. He does have the intensity, but it's a controlled intensity. He knows when to box. He knows when to throw straight punches, but he also knows how to fight on the ropes and land short shots, and he knows how to smother. Because when he's on the ropes, it's not like he's going for broke and throwing anything that he wants. He's picking the right shots, smothering, making sure he's defensively responsible. He does get caught with some punches. We saw that in the first fight. In those exchanges, he was on the ropes. Castano would land some shots. We saw fewer of that this time. We saw it having less of an effect, and we saw Charlo having more of an effect when he would land counter hooks. In the first fight, on 2 occasions, I remember seeing Castano getting hurt with counter shots that Charlo was landing while he was on the ropes. With this time, he landed a counter hook to the body, right hook, followed by a left hook to the head. Something that we've seen a lot with the likes of Mike Tyson back in the day, right? You kind of distract him to the body, hit him with the top. What was different this time is that rather than landing it on the chin, he landed it on the temple. And Brian Castano lost total equilibrium. It was kind of a delay. They were like clinching, and the ref was going to come in for a second. But during that time, Castano's legs went out from under him, and he was badly hurt. And it looked like he wasn't going to recover. Those temple shots are really bad. So it's a combination of being on the back foot, boxing, landing your counter shots, then knowing how to counter it by going to the body first, then to the head, and then also landing to the temple. That really proved to be cause a lot of damage to Brian Castano, and he couldn't recover. So very fun fight. And like you said, for the Undisputed Championship.
Yeah, and I know you you're one person that's been vocal about it. You love when, titles are on the line, when we get to know who that one guy is in the division. And absolutely, undoubtedly, Jermell Charlo is that guy at 154 pounds. I thought the action 1 through 6 was high intensity, really exciting. And then around the 7th, Charlo really seemed to change the pace of the fight and control the action. And I think, he had buzzed Castano a few times up to that point, and maybe made him a little bit more tentative coming in, because it was in between those exchanges, in between those punches, when Charlo seemed to be, back against the ropes and getting hit himself, and he would just counter with one shot. It's like, I think it was the 4th round. Castano literally won 2 minutes and 59 seconds of that round. And now 1 second, he pulled back at the end, and boom, Charlo, really clipped him. That was, I think the first one that really got Castano's attention. In the 5th and 6th, he kept coming, but by the 7th, he was a little bit more tentative, and Charlo was able really to measure the distance, work his jab, and intelligent movement, not like that high intensity movement where he's like, running around the ring. He was working at his pace, not tiring himself out. And it's funny because you see him, he gets cracked sometimes, and he was getting hit by Castano, and he like smiles. I don't know if these like gym wars maybe with Errol Spence or maybe the work that he's done, but it's like he almost likes being caught and getting his attention with these power shots. It's like, okay, yeah, cool. Like let's keep going. So he's got that fire in him, which was exciting to see. And he just was the best version of himself. I thought Derek James, again, has shown he's a top level, perhaps arguably the best trainer in boxing. He's got a guy on the cusp of being undisputed at 147, and now an undisputed 154-pound champion in his stable. Again, one of the best young trainers. I mean, he's proven it time and time again. So that whole team just did a great job, and it's interesting what Jermell Charlo said. I want to get your thoughts on this after the fight. He's like, maybe I'll see if I can do this at 160. Wow. So, yeah, if he moves up, and let's say his brother Jermall moves up to 168, that clears that issue, of him trying to get another belt at 168, Jermall, and kind of clears the issue of, okay, well, your brother's a champion at this division. So, how is that going to work? maybe it ends up being Jermell, the guy that fights Triple G, or maybe it ends up being Jermell that fights for one of these vacant titles now that he could just move up and be, bumped into that mandatory spot. So if it's something that he wants to do, there's a lot of juicy and appetizing, bouts that could happen at 160. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And, you mentioned Derek James, you mentioned Errol Spence Jr. We got to start putting some respect on people like Derek James, give him some credit for the work that he's done. Also for Jermell Charlo. He's been on a really historic run at super welterweight since he captured the title. I think in 2016, it was against John Jackson, obviously the son of the Hawk Jackson. He fought Austin Trout, knockout against Erickson Lubin, the revenge fight against Tony Harrison. I mean, he's really had an impressive run. Jason Rosario, and then now with Brian Castano. And it's the culmination of, I guess, 6 years of having first captured a world title and now becoming an undisputed champion. So I don't like pound for pound lists. I think it's all over the place. But if you have some sort of list or any understanding of who the top fighters in the world are, you have to include Jermell Charlo as part of your list of the top fighters. Undisputed champion. He's kept his belts for a very long time, and he deserves it. And then moving forward, yeah, he could move up to 160 and fight for a world title. I'd like to see him stay at undisputed and defend. I don't think we see that enough. I don't think we see that ever. Bernard Hopkins, I think he captured the undisputed crown and then he lost it to Jermaine Taylor. Terrence Crawford, after Ndongo, moved up. Usyk captured the undisputed title, moved up. Josh Taylor made one defense, moved up. I don't know. I think it'd be nice to see a reigning champ kind of, stay there for a little while, defend the undisputed title 2, maybe 3 times before moving up. But a lot of exciting fights to have at 160. And of course, with Brian Castano, if Jermell does move up, I think he'd be a world champion again. He needs to fix some things. I think that he's very strong, very powerful. He's thick, excuse the phrase.
Damn, boy, he's thick.
But he's very, he has this wide, strong
trunk
frame.
Legs, man.
Yeah, and he's able to cut the ring just by his sheer presence alone and having a high guard. It's not a diversified offense, and I think that's what he needs to work on. He needs to work on moving his head more, learning how to get low, learning how to use angles when his opponent is on the ropes. And like the great Teddy Atlas says, learning not to go out the front door, go out the side door. That's how he was getting caught sometimes, by pulling back after punching rather than ducking or moving to the side. So it's not the end for Brian Castano and for the Jermell Charlo. It could be the beginning of a historic defense of the undisputed crown or a move up to 160 pounds.
Yeah, I would love to see that as well, but I understand why it doesn't happen. When you look at the sanctioning fees for each title and each organization, you're talking about almost $500,000 in sanctioning fees, probably just to defend those 4 titles. So, depending on who he's fighting and defending against, I mean, his purse may not be, the highest of his career. And so if you're just defending against, let's say, a number 1 contender, that may not have the notoriety or the claim to fame to really elevate that fight into, a super matchup, then maybe you're getting paid less. Maybe it's not a pay-per-view fight or whatever the case is, so that Jermell doesn't make as much. And then he's got to pay all that money. I understand, sometimes maybe why that doesn't happen.
And the importance is in doing it, in achieving that feat, right? Once you're undisputed champ and you get a belt is relinquished or you get stripped, it doesn't mean anything. It means that something's wrong with the politics with regard to sanctioning bodies,
exactly.
But you're still the undisputed champ because you made that achievement. So I see what you're saying. He could still make defenses and still leave 1 or 2 titles vacant. You know what I mean? But right. I agree with you.
And of course, we're advocating for the best to fight the best. I think, there's no question, obviously, who the guy is, who the main man is. I mean, regardless of if you vacate all the titles or not. I mean, it doesn't matter at this point. He's gone through and won all the titles. He is the undisputed champion. So what he wants to do now, belts or without belts, is fine with me if he's going to stay at 154. If he moves up to 160, of course, I'd like to see him, compete for a title and maybe try to, like he said, maybe make that run again and go for undisputed at 160. That would be fun. Next up, we had a fight card on Triller, which was headlined by Sergey Kovalev making his cruiserweight debut against Tervel Pulev, the brother of Kubrat Pulev, who was on the co-main event against Jerry Forrest. But Sergey Kovalev, hasn't been in the ring in a while. He's had some issues, of course, legal issues, and then, getting a fight canceled against Bektar the Bully, fight that was supposed to happen on DAZN. And so there's been a lot of stuff going on with Sergey Kovalev. He's still with Buddy McGirt. And I think, the 10-round fight against Pulev showed that he could still mix it up. Was, again, like I said, his cruiserweight debut. He won a unanimous decision. And, what I want to ask you about, Gabe, is the landscape at cruiserweight. What can Kovalev really do at this advanced stage in his career? I mean, he said in the post-fight, interview, I was a little rusty, but I thought all in all, it's just that he's not the crusher anymore. So, McGirt's got him working behind the jab, really boxing well, and he can do that to a certain extent. But against guys maybe like Lawrence Okoli, who's younger, Breedis, who's been a long-standing champion, has mixed it up with, world-class opponents. Where does maybe Kovalev fit into this scenario, and can he actually compete and win a title at cruiserweight?
Sergey Kovalev hasn't been the same since the losses to Andre Ward. I think Andre Ward really demonstrated that he was relying too much on his power, especially because Sergey Kovalev really showed that he didn't really have a left hook. And that's something you want to say. You want someone having diversified offense. So he hasn't been the same since the losses against Andre Ward. Like you mentioned, he's boxing a little bit more under the guidance of Buddy McGirt, because he knows that he can't continue winning fights via knockout, because he was having difficulties doing that at light heavyweight. Now at cruiserweight, it's going to be even harder, especially since the guys are a lot bigger. It's very difficult seeing him become world champion again, especially with guys like Lawrence Okoli, Junior Bakabu, who have world titles at cruiserweight. And, the size difference is going to be a factor. And if you're moving up a division and you were relying on power on that lower division and not exactly on technique and skill, it's going to be very difficult for you to keep up with people who are larger and stronger and who have that size and reach advantage over you.
Yeah, 100%. They need to match him well. And I guess it depends on, if he's fighting, back on the zone against, maybe some of these guys that we mentioned, Breedis, Okoli. I don't know where he goes really from here, because he's going to need to work himself into a position like that. Now, maybe one of these guys wants a quote unquote name on their resume. Kovalev still has notoriety and a name, so it's a very winnable fight for any one of those. And, who knows, maybe Kovalev gets an upset victory and can snag a title against one of these guys.
Yeah, though, let's give some credit to Kovalev. It was fun seeing him knock a lot of people out before that Andre Ward fight. He was really on an impressive run. I remember when he fought Bernard Hopkins. Bernard Hopkins obviously was much older at that time, but he ended up capturing like 3 of the major titles at that time. It was really fun to watch Kovalev back in the day with this power and all that, but it's going to be very difficult for him at cruiserweight.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good names in and around that time. Obviously, the one fight we didn't get to see was the Adonis Stevenson fight, which was always an asterisk.
Oh my God.
What
a travesty that fight never happened.
Yeah, he fought Pascal twice, which is fun. Pascal's still competitive. Just a lot of good fights in and around that time. And yeah, like you said, he was running people over. He was knocking people out. And was a fun time for boxing until he met a guy named Andre Ward.
Damn, man, you're right. We didn't see Kovalev Stevenson. What the hell, man?
Fucking boxing, man. Lastly, we had a card on DAZN headlined by Zurdo Ramirez against Dominic Bozell. Not the fight that people want to see Zurdo in. The odds in this fight going in had Zurdo favored at a minus 3,300 on the money line, which is insane. And I mean, he really showed why. He beat Bozell pillar to post until stopping him in the 4th round. Gabe, you were ringside. And obviously you didn't do the post-fight translation. Zurdo took your job, actually. He was answering questions in English and then translating in Spanish, which I thought was funny and good on him. I mean, he seems to be kind of like we saw at one point with Canelo, really getting comfortable in his interviews and mixing it up a little bit and showing more of his personality. He seems all in all a great guy. And hopefully he can stay busy and continue to fight. But the one caveat, the one but is we got to see him against someone more at his level. He's in an exciting division. And obviously the fight that he's been calling for ever since he signed up with Golden Boy has been the Dimitri Bivol fight. And now, Bivol coming off obviously the biggest win of his career, beating the pound for pound king and Canelo Alvarez. Everyone's like, oh, Bivol's in another league. But, 5 minutes ago, this would have been a fight that we all would have been happy with. I'm still happy to see. So I hope for Zurdo Ramirez's, career and his case at trying to grab some titles and be the best in his division. I hope for that sake, he gets at least that opportunity, because we've seen him at the lower weights and earlier in his career, fights against Arthur Abraham, Jesse Hart twice. I mean, he's got some pretty good wins, but it's like since then, he just hasn't had that opportunity. And so definitely we want to see, him against the best. Gabe, from ringside, what were your thoughts of the victory, the stoppage, and what he spoke about post-fight, and the guys that he wants in his future?
Right. Zurdo is in need of a marquee fight, a fight that really makes him stand out as a top fighter. He's been looking for that for quite some time. At 168, can you really point to a fight where we said, all right, this is where he demonstrated that he was a top fighter by having defeated him, right? I think he's looking for that at 175 pounds. This fight was a stay busy fight while he looks for other opportunities. And like you mentioned, one of those opportunities is against Dimitri Bivol, who's coming off a spectacular win against Canelo Alvarez. From ringside, I mean, what I saw is what people saw at home. He was taking Dominic Bozo from one corner to another, beating the crap out of him. And Bozo, what he was doing was just, relying on his high guard defense. It was very similar. And I thought this came to mind ringside from when he beat Arthur Abraham to become 168-pound champion back in 2015. If I remember correctly, I think that was the undercard of Mayweather-Pacquiao. When he defeated Arthur Abraham for the 168-pound title. So very similar, but Dominic couldn't really do anything last night. He tried to let go of some punches and counter, but you can see that he really lacked solid skills in terms of his offense, especially when countering against Zurdo. So not much to see in this fight, not much to take away from it, other than that Zurdo is ready for a top competitor. Like you said, it could be the Dimitri Bivol fight, but there's a lot of business to take care of at 175 pounds. He's one of those guys, but let's be honest, what we all want to see is Better Beef versus Bivol. If Better Beef can defeat Joe Smith Jr. We don't want to overlook Joe Smith Jr., but I think the consensus is that Better Beef wins that fight because he's just so talented and powerful. And so, I mean, right there, we have 4 names at light heavyweight that could be very interesting in terms of making matches between them. And then also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention next Friday, we have a fight between John Pascal and Fan Lang Meng. Fan Lang Meng is the number 1 contender in the IBF for the light heavyweight championship. So interesting names at 175 pounds. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. And I have to mention one thing. Zurdo, they said, came in at 204 pounds. You talk about Brian Castano being thick. Man, Ramirez came in. That boy's thick. He came in
204
on a tacos and chill diet.
Wow, that's 30 pounds. Jesus.
He looked huge. He looked just, a lot bigger than Bozell. And I was trying to imagine, like, for as much as we made about the height and the size of Bivol over Canelo, that's not going to be the case with Ramirez. And so he did look a little bit slower to me. I mean, his style has also changed a little bit. I think since, his Top Rank days, he's really sitting down on his punches, looking to engage more. I think you saw that more with the Yuneski Gonzalez fight. He's willing to get in there, mix it up, kind of walking guys down, being a more power puncher. Now, if that style, I'm not saying is going to, cause Bivol problems, but it's just a different fight. So for those saying, oh, well, look at what he did to Canelo and then what would he do to Zurdo? Completely different fight. A guy more his size, and an exciting style matchup as well, because if he's coming towards Bivol, can Bivol really do the things just off of the stick, basically the basic 1-2 that he did to Canelo? I don't think so. I think he's going to have to mix it up and do different things. Ramirez obviously does have some lulls at times. He does get hit cleanly and has some gaps in his defense. But again, like Bivol, it could be this thing where, fighting at the level of your competition, when that guy's not bringing anything back towards you, that's really going to hurt you. You can walk in there and try to be impressive and score a knockout and do the things that hypes the fans up. Good for you. I like that Zurdo did what he needed to do, go in there and dispense of a guy that is not on your level. But again, you mentioned Joe Smith, Beterbiev. I mean, yeah, any of those guys would be fun fights for Zurdo. Let's just hope that it happens this year, that he gets one of these more higher profile names in a fight.
And then you talk about it more, Zurdo versus Bivol is a really interesting fight, like you mentioned, because of the size difference. It's not going to be as the size isn't going to be a factor as it was against Canelo Alvarez. So very interesting fight. And, I think it's closer than some people might think it will be, right? Because like you said, he's the size, he has a different style. And I think Zurdo is smarter than people give him credit. Because yesterday, even though he had a guy who didn't want to fight him, he was smart in terms of the offense, punching around the guard and stuff like that. He is vulnerable when he has a live dog in there. So interesting style matchup with Dimitri Bivol.
Yeah, and like you said, he is vulnerable when he has a live dog. That's part of what makes it exciting to watch him. You know what I mean? Like, we don't always want to see these guys that are flawless and this and that. Now, that's fun as well. Shout out to hat tip to Jerome Boots Ennis, because that's what he's been lately. Lights out. Doesn't matter who you put in front of him. But at the same time, too, Zurdo's back and forth with his opponents. That's fun. That's fun to watch in a time when people are always complaining like, oh, he runs or he does that. Zurdo's going to give you an exciting fight. He's going to get his offense off. He's going to take some licks back. And up until now, he's won every fight and been able to impose his will. But yeah, it remains to be seen which one of these marquee matchups he gets next. And let's hope it's sooner rather than later.
Thank you for listening to the RBR Recap. Make sure to follow us on social media at RBR Recap and visit RBRRecap.com for the latest episodes.